So the retail rollout. So our fantastic panelists come from different corners of the retail development space and will be exploring the full journey from vision to opening day. Please welcome to the stage Mimi Gilmore Buckley, who has co-founded multiple hospitality beloved brands, Martin Skinner from Taylor Incorporated, Garrick Newman from the Restaurant Design Studio, and Matthew Hughes from Complete Construction. Thank you.
Nothing a bit stompy. Bought some notes just in case.
Good morning, everyone. Fantastic to be here. This segment of the retail conference is going to be focused on hospitality. When we put this together, we didn't quite realise we had such a sort of a slant in that area, but very pleased to have Mimi Gilmore with us. We've got Matt Hughes from Complete Construction and Garrett Newman, who has started a new business, the Design Academy. Now, interesting thing about these panelists is we've all had a bit of a background in owning a hospitality business, and so this is going to be quite interesting. I wondered if we might start today's session by getting a little bit of an overview of the market, and Mimi, I think you're best positioned to talk a little bit about that on behalf of hospitality in New Zealand.
Sure.
If you could start.
Look, as you all know, this year has been a challenging one for everybody, and I think probably, I was saying earlier, in all honesty, probably one of my hardest. But what I do think that this year has, I think when any tough times, there's always opportunities, and I think what this year has really, the wonderful things about this year has been that those relationships that we've had with our landlords, Burger Burger's 11 years old this year, have really demonstrated how important that relationship is. For me personally, I had a talking to from a friend in the middle of this year, and we've repurposed an old site that wasn't really servicing the model of Burger Burger in this current market. So we opened that 3 weeks ago, and that's been hugely successful, which is great too. But yeah, I guess overall it's been a hard year. Like hospitality, we have rising food costs, we've had rising wage costs, we've had everything from, obviously, in the last few years, COVID sort of kicked it off, and then we had floods that meant we couldn't get a spinach leaf to save ourselves, and then we had CO2 shortages, I think we couldn't find any team members 2 years ago, and now we have a lot of options, and that's a really exciting time for us. I think overall, last week I got asked by Kim Knight what I thought about the Michelin Guide coming to New Zealand, whether it was good or bad, and I think from my perspective, I think it is good. What I would love to see is it demonstrate that we have this really wonderful industry. We have a huge amount of talent. I think on the world stage, we have a really high level of product, and we have people like Josh Emmett, like we have our superstars, and then we have, maybe the Burger Burgers that sit at the other end, but I think overall our quality is extremely high, and I think it's a really important backbone of this country. So I'm, having said this has been an incredibly challenging year, it has been, but I think the outlook is exciting, and I think we're going to see, like we've already started seeing some wonderful changes, and I think for me, I really just hope we all, like landlords, agents, restaurant owners, I guess consultants are able to just take away from this year that it's so important for us to all work together, because, people ask me what is hospitality, and I always say it's a science and an art, and I think the combination of the conversations that we have with landlords and agents and everybody is a science and an art. And I like making art, so I'm quite keen to see us all make some magic in the next year.
Mimi, 4 or 5 years ago, you were here
Yes,
at the retail conference.
I was.
Now you're juggling motherhood
Yes.
with a small business empire.
Yeah.
What are some of the changes that you've noticed most about the industry in the last? Well, what's happening right now?
I think the biggest challenges, I think in hospitality is definitely the rising food costs. Like, we don't have a huge amount of margin anyway, and it's just being squashed from every direction. Look, we have 8 burger sites. They all perform differently. What we have, like probably our top performer currently is Torbay. It's isolated and it's in a densely populated area. It's a mix of weirdly like sort of boomers and young families. It sort of goes through these different waves. So I really think the difference now is like, especially now, like that spend is an emotional one, and people want not only obviously a great product, but they want to feel something. And that's not to say that hasn't always been the case, but I think it's more relevant now because of the economic situation. And I think that's really just forced us to sort of, I think at the beginning of the year we sort of all sat around and said, how are we going to get through this? And what it really showed us was to go back to go back to why we started this. And for us it was about building a restaurant group that was accessible to a wide group of people, that they could come. If you've got a family, I think I have 3 small children, and somewhere that we can go and kids kind of get fed first and they can kind of cause a bit of chaos, but mum and dad can have a cocktail and a beer and everyone's happy. I think that's become more relevant to us in some sites, whereas like the same in like Commercial Bay, for instance, as I said earlier, like we've just seen this sort of big picture that they had, which was the tourism is coming in, and where that site really serves as well as like concerts or sports games when they're coming into the train station, or work lunches where they have to be in and out really quickly. So I guess it has changed. I think it's always going to change, but I think what we've realised more than ever is like, what are we really good at? And fundamentally, hospitality, it's consistency, and consistency is key. And then, quality of experience and quality of product. And then for us, it's just really showing that whilst we are one business, we need to service our communities and we need to look at those sites individually. And that's really, I guess, where we've now led down to franchising, which is what I've been learning a lot about this year. And I'm actually really excited. I think I was always scared that it would lose our magic, but I actually think now it's the thing that's going to put the magic in. So yeah, I think I've got a lot of friends in hospitality. Some, I think, at the high end are doing really well. I think the middle market is challenged. I think within that middle market, I think it's really location dependent on how it's performing. And, and we're lucky we can see that because we've got 8 sites. But my sister owns Fatima's, for instance, and it's similar. Their Ponsonby Road is, thriving by far. And then obviously there's Uber, and our business models have changed fundamentally. So that's really where we got to with Newmarket, was when we started Burger, 10% of our trade was takeaway, and now in some sites it's 30 and 35%. We don't need the same footprint. So it's just, there's a lot of changes, and I guess it's evolving, and I don't think, for instance, Uber's going anywhere. And so we just have to look at what we're doing now and make, good, smart decisions.
Great context, thanks, Mimi. Look, we've got 3 people here involved in the fit-out and design process, and I'm curious to know, in terms of collaboration, which you mentioned, Garrick, when is the right time to bring people into the process?
If you can get everyone involved in the beginning, that's the ideal solution. We talked about this with Matt. Everyone has their contributions, their skill sets, their abilities, their areas of expertise, and the builders can be involved right in the beginning. And if you can be clear and open about what the budget is, then you can work towards that. It's when there's we talked about it as well, there's a lack of trust, obviously, between the different parties. Most people have had, if you've had an experience where you've been tricked by someone charismatic, and then you end up not trusting people, and if it's just on the construction side, maybe you get hit by a heap of variations, and you're scared of that going forward, so you hold on to your budget, you don't tell anyone, and then you show up on Matt's desk, and what's being designed is actually way more expensive than what your budget is for. So everyone can be involved closely from the beginning, but yeah, it's very much reliant on
Matt,
trust there.
Matt, what do you say to clients and designers who say that fit outs are too expensive?
I mean, it's hard to disagree. I think a lot of the time, a big focus of our business is actually, hearing a lot of the stories like Mimi talks about, and focusing on initiatives that we can try and bring to the table around achieving the desired outcome, but understanding that we're a big part of these business plans. And a lot of projects that we looked at, we were doing some work looking at our tender board recently, and I think of the last dozen projects we priced, dozen significant projects, are probably projects 750K and up. I think maybe 30% of those projects have proceeded, and that's with significant international brands or local brands that have reasonably significant means. So you can imagine then the next tier down, the middle of the market or even the bottom of the market, if the top guys can't make a business plan work. And now we're very mindful of the fact that I appreciate a lot of people, depending on their governance structure, etc., have a need for commercial tension. But to Garrick's point, I think without question the most successful projects that we're involved in, and this is not complete construction, I think this is a structure thing, the earlier we are sitting around the table and offering some value, often we're the last person at the table, and by that stage it's got past the landlord, the leasing agent, the designer, all of the consultants. Then you run a tender process with between, maybe ideally 3, but recently we just saw a tender with 8 contractors tendering it, and that's a job under $150,000. There's just no possible good outcome for client or for contractor in a scenario like that, in my personal opinion. And then it's a race to the bottom. And then by the time we get to the table and it's priced, and I would say probably 75% of the tenders that we're involved in now will then have a significant value engineering round. And we've seen, sometimes you're sitting around the table with the client saying, we've got to cut this budget in half. And, we're sitting there going, how the hell did it get to this point? We're the 6th person in the line. How did it get past the landlord? How did it get past the designer to get to this point to find out you've only got half of the money? And that's not in a contractor's margin. I can assure everyone in the room here, there's nobody in our industry that's playing with that sort of margin. And unfortunately, when that value engineering process, I'm talking to 2 designers on this side, the first thing that's cut out of the budget is all the cool stuff. Yes. It's all the stuff that makes the magic. And, there was a great example. We just caught the end of the IKEA presentation. How cool was that site in Vienna? I can't wait to go and check it out if I get an opportunity. And, I think the challenge for all of us is how do we create really cool stuff, but at a budget where people can make the numbers work, and not just I can open on day one and then I hope it works out. They need to be able to put together a set of numbers that says, even in my worst foreseeable circumstance for the next 6 or 12 months, I'm going to be around to be able to build upon it and be around in 10 years' time.
And so what is cool and what is magic and what works in hospitality? Because some of the examples that we've got up here on the big screen are not your high-value fit-outs. Garrick, maybe you can talk us through a couple of examples or experiences that you've had working with business entrepreneurs who want to make a go in hospitality. What do you tell them? What magic do you try and instill?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, quite a few of these photos that come up have been ones we've designed over the years, and these are operators that have got 1, 2, 3 sites that don't have millions of dollars behind them. They've got a few $100,000 maybe in the bank account, and this is serious stuff for them. And I've got a strong feeling that we don't need as many high-end venues as we do have right now, and people don't need that to... You don't need that to be a successful venue. What you need is a space that people enjoy being in, that speaks to whatever the brand is, and creates a comfortable space that then you can layer on top all the hospitality things that Mimi's so good at, whether it's your service, your music, your actual product, your environment, etc., your lighting. To go back to your question, what I've always tried to communicate to people is just understand who you are, understand what your business stands for, understand who your target market is, and then design to that. And you don't need imported Italian tiles, you don't need $800 chairs, you don't need a high-end venue to create a space that can be really successful. When you often see it in a lot of these spaces, like Broke Boy Taco comes up there, it's a very simple fit out, but he's got a product that people love. He has a great social media presence. The Peaches Hot Chickens guys as well. That was designed based around his grandmother's kitchen in the south of America, where he learned to fry chicken from his grandma. And again, it was a low budget. He did a lot of the work himself, but queues out the door from day one, and now he sells almost a ton of chicken a week. So.
If there's something that's not short in this industry, it's passion, right?
Yeah.
And Mimi, you're pretty hands-on. A trip to Indonesia, if you can, to pick up some light fittings or what have you.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of inspiration that comes from you, and I know you bounce with designers, but leave your mark within each project. Maybe you can run through your process a little bit in terms of the creative magic that gets put together.
I think it's about identity. Like, I think all of those brands have a really clear identity. So, and I think for me with Burger, it was about like changing that perception of what a burger experience could be, making it feel like a restaurant. And I guess one of my focuses is always the comfort of almost feeling that you're in someone else's home. So I think like for me, it's always a mix of old and new, high-low, as we like to say. Like, I don't know, for example, I wanted these big, lovely lights from Mama, and we got a quote through that was like $4,000 each. And then I have some artists that I've worked with on and off for years, and they work on film sets. And we ended up buying some light fittings from Freedom on sale, pulling them apart, and then going down the road and finding a curtain maker, and she just figured out how to zhuzhi them up. So, I think it's a mix of things like, as you said, it's a bigger picture. What are your, like, for me with Mama especially, like, it was acoustic levels, it was how comfortable are the seats, how durable, and then what can we do? I love the use of art and hand finishes, which are not as hard as they look, I think it's about sort of having something that's really operationally sound, and I think you need hospitality experience to understand that. I think too often I've seen designers build these beautiful restaurants and they just don't function. And then they come to me and they're like, can you fix it? And I'm like, well, this wasn't designed to work unless we're going to like chop things in half or, So I think fundamentally you start with an operational structure, X, Y, and Z, I need these seats. Depending on who your customer is, what are the acoustics, the magic things, like we have a lot of artwork, we have, music. We use a company called So Sound in New Zealand. They customise their music to you. That's been really wonderful to work with, and it's just quite magical to see the difference between something like that. But yeah, I think it's, as I said, like I went to ASCO. I'm very interested in like aesthetics, and I'm very sensitive to them. But I do work with Buster from Wonder Group. He's really wonderful, and I think we kind of go to back and forth. To your comment earlier, look. We love designers, but often I don't think they know the meaning of the word budget. So it's kind of like we're not made of money. And so sometimes it's like, they do give you the $800 chair, and you're like, or we could do this $300 one, Or it's like maybe you've got a magic area of the room, your big private dining room, and you're like, I'm going to have fab chairs in here because this is where people are going to spend longer periods of time, and, we're going to have a win there and not over here. So, I think it's the reality is you've got to know what you're doing. You've operationally got to design it well. You've got to be aware of what your budget is. I always tell people you've got to allow for contingency, and I think you've got to sit around a table at the very beginning and soak up all this experience and knowledge at every level. Like, we're looking at this new development currently, and I'm like, literally, it's very boring, but one of the first things I say to them is, tell me that there's going to be a centralised grease trap, you know what all of this extraction is going to look like, you know how much room you're going to need for rubbish. It's like the same things that pop up, you know. Yes, we need really lovely, you know, I have a daughter with special needs, so I'm very aware of the need for, you know, for disability toilet in good space. So I'm like, but what happens if we built one big central one and then everyone doesn't have to build, you know, unnecessary things on the, you know, in the footprint, which we're already trying to sort of maximise because we're on a budget. So yeah, I think it's just the boring stuff. And as you know, Matt said, like, if you look at a restaurant, the reason I could do Mama was all the expensive stuff. So normally, if we had built that from scratch, it probably would have been 800 grand, to be honest. And we spent 250 on it, and that's because all the boring things were already done, you know, like the kitchens, the plumbing, you know, we did actually put some new aircon in, which almost killed me, but essential. But yeah, I think it's looking at your budget and making sure you've got your necessities, but like allowing room for magic. And there's so many clever people in this country, and I think like one of the greatest lessons I learned was going through the Mexico process. We had, again, all these artists with us, and they like taught me to be really bold with colour, you know. And I think even things like there's services now where you can buy really amazing, like Society 6, they basically buy artwork from artists all over the world, and you can buy a beautiful print that's really accessible. I think it's about like making it feel like making sure that you're sticking to that identity. And I think, you know, I don't like the word brand too much because it seems, it's like you lose the emotion, but it is. It's like understanding an identity in a brand and then sort of having some fun in that.
So the role of the designer might actually be a little bit different to the traditional architectural aspects, actually bringing the creativity and the ideas, and being clever with the budget. Matt, about budget.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just jumping in on that point, because I think for anyone in the room that's a trusted advisor to a client, I think the first question you have to ask, you've got to get it on the table, the budget. And it's this tightly held thing, like, you know, and even at the point that we're involved, nobody wants to share the budget. And even when you're trying to value engineer it with them to try and hit this magical number that no one knows what it is. And never in my career have I seen a situation where the price has gone up because you've realised the budget. If anything, it's normally a holy heck, how are we going to get it down there? And, you know, it's never driving the price up. We're never coming in underneath people's expectations of going, oh, there's an extra 100 grand that we can just pocket. That just doesn't happen. So I think having that conversation on the table is really important. And the difference between, you know, if I pick some random numbers, the difference between knowing that you're working to a $500,000 budget and designing with that in your mind, rather than designing $1 million place that has to come back to $500,000, the finished outcome's quite dramatically different, because you're starting with all the cool stuff that you know you can afford. If you take the other option, you actually lose all of that stuff, and you just end up with the mechanical system and the toilet and everything like that, and a pretty vanilla outcome. So, I mean, Queens is on the screen right now. We're lucky to do, you know, we work across the whole industry, and, you know, I'm probably a serial, probably hospo tourist. So every time we go travelling, we love looking at, I'm sure there's many people in the room that when they go to different countries, they'll, you know, straight into the restaurants and stuff. And Singapore would be one of my favourite destinations, because you can go and get an amazing meal in Singapore for $5, and you can spend $500, and it caters across the spectrum really well. And I think we've got the opportunity to do that in New Zealand. Maybe not $5, that ship might have sailed, but it's really important that we have good offers at different levels in the market. But the budget is important even at the top. So the Queen's, Harrison's over there that project managed the project, and, you know, we took $500,000 in the budget out of the specified light fittings, $500,000, and I don't think anyone's ever walked into that venue and said, oh, they really skimped on the light fittings. I don't think anyone's even noticed that there was $500,000 taken out of it. So it's
Yeah.
really important, I think, to actually have that on the table right the way from woe to go. And
So I'm hearing trust and collaboration from the outset. It's going to make everything a lot better. Garrick, you've got some really awesome hacks in terms of the design process. I'm going to put you on the spot for people who may be starting out in a hospo or looking to spend less in certain areas on a budget. What are your tricks?
Right, that is on the spot.
Find
What-
an existing site.
Yeah,
and
that's
flip
my
it.
number one push for everyone. That'll be 25% less straight away. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
75% less straight
Yeah.
away. If I think about the people in the room, there's obviously a lot of big landlords in here, and trying to speak to what your question was, but also speaking to them. It keeps coming up. Budget's an issue, and operators, they don't have often, a massive amount of money behind them. So for the people in the room, if you can provide the things that Mimi talked about in the sense of that base build level of stuff, grease trap is $5,000. If you do an underbench one, if you can provide one on site because you've got more access to capital, that's great. And all the mechanical extraction, fire protection, emergency lighting, everything, acoustics, whatever you can do. When it comes to being able to design it on a lower budget, it is, theatre people are great. They've got a lot of skill sets. Those artisans are great. Sure, if you can bring some stuff from overseas, you can do a lot with paint that you can't do with tiles. There's a lot of different, you can find exactly a lot of things that Mimi said. You can find lights from a lighting direct and make some tweaks to them, and you create something that could have cost $900, but you do it for $90. I don't know how many hospitality people are in the room right now that are looking for that information, but I've developed a restaurant design academy thing where I teach restaurant operators to design their own venues by using SketchUp and simple 3D software, so they can kind of take control of that process and get a bit more confidence around what they're doing. And then, yes, of course, they can still work with designers and other artists to get a bit more input, but it can be a way for them to try and reduce their consultant expenses, play around with some lower cost materials, and hopefully almost certainly get an environment that people still love being in, but doesn't cost them twice what they have.
Matt,
I have a list which is not as exciting as that, but it's basically all of the things that we've learned over the last I have learned 15 years, and I give that to a developer straight up. And it's things like, where does the water, what does the power load need to be, where's the extraction going to sit? Like, it's, again, goes back to that grease strip, but like, I almost feel like, take this, if you know that you're going to have 6 tenancies in here and you want 4 out of the 5 to be hospitality and 2 to be retail or services, that's almost a sweet spot, because it's saving them money, it's saving us money, it's just the most efficient way forward. And I feel like that's the number one thing I can say is moving forward, is like this kind of working together from that very beginning allows, the magic at the end. We're not going to have it otherwise.
so shared facilities, back of house, some of the functional
clever services, like being really realistic about what services, and outputs you're going to need to make, like when you have 4 hospitality services, you've got 4 extractions going up into a roof, like if you've got 4 fans, they're going to go it's always a bit of a surprise, So like designing, I don't know, whether it's roofs so that you hide them and you don't see them, or good access so that we can clean them and that maintains your building as well as us being able to, look after. It's a 2-way relationship, so it's just like, I've got that list. It's not exciting, but if anybody wants that, I'll give it to you.
That's nice to hear, and that's experience talking, right? Because it's very, very easy for an experienced operator to get into a situation, Matt, where they think they're up for a certain amount of expenditure, and all of a sudden they've got their extract and their services in place, and there's nothing left.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. I mean, Commercial Bay was one that we worked on extensively. We delivered the entire Harbour Eats floor, and that. I think they did a really good. Pardon me.
It was emotional.
Yeah, it was a journey, but
It's a journey.
I think there was a lot of work that went in the front end of that, doing a lot of the things with the pods. I mean, the original concept of that pod came out of a market in Madrid. They then sort of tried to work it into what might work in a New Zealand context. Tried to factor the fact that they could, everything needed to have a hand wash sink within a certain radius, so if we put one between the two tenancies, they can share it. All of the extraction ducts were brought into a blanked off location. So you can do a lot of that in the front end without incurring a heck of a lot more development costs, but saving a lot, and whether it's amortised into the rent for the tenant or just you're bringing an easier price point to the market. I think those things are important. I think it's really important though, I can think of one example where in one of those tenancies where by the time it got to us there was a price for a tenancy which was north of 100 grand but not a lot, early hundreds, and the tenant had a $20,000 budget. Now the minimum amount that they had to do without even starting on their fit out was underbench hot water cylinder, extract system with the UV filtration, etc. There was a list of things on there that got to about 40,000 before they started on anything, and somehow they got all the way to us with a 20k budget. They actually had a $22,000 marble bench top. So, in jest we were like, well, you can get your bench top, that's about it.
Yeah. I also think, for the next year, from a lending perspective, the banks are incredibly, if I hear one more time hospitality is a really big risk right now, I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. We've been in the business for a long time and we don't have a lot of debt, and I think the reality of the budgets in the year to 2 years coming is real, and we've got, as I said, a lot of experience. Even with Mama, we basically started with a debt-free asset. I went to the bank, we're putting 150k in of capital, and the bank, and they just wanted 100 grand working capital, and they're like, ooh, and I was like, what? This is nothing. So I think the reality in the next year is we're going, the landlords are, you're gonna have to lean in hard, because otherwise you're not gonna get anybody going in there. And I think we're kind of at this pivotal point where we've got, immigration semi-restricts who can come in there bringing in the money. They're the ones, there's not a huge amount of money in here. Our lending facilities are tightened up like nobody's business. So we're all going to have to be very creative in the next few years to keep moving forward. And it's kind of a bit weird to think that, hey, we are going to have this sort of lovely rebirth of hospitality, but it's also just where's the money coming from, honey,
Yeah, sorry, just to add to that, a badge that we wear, and it's heavy, is that, probably 80% of our clients, their capital that sits behind their fit-outs is their home, and you realise that if this doesn't go well for them, they're probably selling their home. And sometimes you realise that and they don't realise that. That's something that we don't take lightly. Our motto in our business initially, when you do all those business courses, they say, what are you really selling? What business are you actually in? We always viewed that our business was, we were making people's dreams come true, because most of our customers were a chef that's worked on the line for 15 years and he's always dreamed of having his own restaurant, and he's finally got to the point where he wants to give it a punt, but he's got all his chips are pushed in the middle, and this either works or it doesn't work, and we're a big part of that.
I used to say that to my designers all the time, this is serious stuff, this is people's livelihoods, and if you can design it and bring it down 100 grand, that makes all the difference to them and the outcome.
And is there alignment between the developers and the landlords and the tenants, do you think, most of the time, or do you think there's a misalignment of expectations? I
think it would be great if landlords could have some adjusted expectations from a design perspective around the finish level and the design level of the interiors and a few of the developments. I think we've got enough in New Zealand around the really resolved higher end side of things, and there's a lot of opportunity for stuff that still looks great and feels great, but in that mall environment, but maybe not quite at that $1 million, $1.5 million fit outs. And people love being in those spaces. You see a lot of the busy joints around, they're not the higher end ones.
They're more accessible, right?
Yeah, I think it's also, and there's a layer there too. Martin and I are actually working with a client at the moment who refuse to go in malls. And they're an international brand, that I won't mention, but everyone in the room will know the brand. They won't go into malls because they want to design for a 20-year fit out. They want to build something that's sustainable and will stand the test of time. They're willing to pay a little bit more for that, but they don't want to be in a position where their landlord's forcing them to do a refurbishment every 7 years just to keep up with what's new. And so that's a big thing for them. I'm also working with another international client right now, who owns 1,500 restaurants, very well heeled, but again, they know their numbers really well, and they've asked us to look for a reasonably premier site in Auckland. They have a clear idea of what they want, and I've got a site that I think would be perfect for it. And I've talked to a number of people now. The last 3 tenants in this particular site have failed. But the landlord's rent profile that they're still targeting for that particular site, the international restaurateur is just laughing at it, going, there's just no way that rent profile works. No one will work in that site. How are they, they're sort of saying to us, going, how can they think they can charge that? I'm like, well,
I think that's true. Like I think I said to you, like I went back to this agent yesterday and they said, we know our total occupancy can't extend beyond 7%. And when I look at this site and I look at this area, I'm working on a budget of, a bracket of 1 to 3 to 1.5. I think that's realistic. At 7%, this is what we can carry. Like that's just the facts. And like you're not going to win and I'm not going to win, if we don't hit that number. So how do we do that? And I think it's just, I think some rents, I don't know, like we have 8 sites. They're all very different experiences. Like I do go into them with are we going to have a good relationship with this landlord? And for me that's like, is there someone I can pick up the phone and talk to? And I think I've learned a bit, like commercial bay I think is a little bit different because it's not a typical mall. I mean there's always going to be frustrations, but I think it's a New Zealand based team, it's a New Zealand based dream. We're in Bayfair for instance in Tauranga and on the Mount, and that's different again. It got bought by quite a big Australian, so it's kind of that relationship has changed. And I think what they did was like that's a perfect example of they're like we're going to build this really beautiful eatery lane, external lane, the thing, and what we learned from that was, like, it is beautiful, it's got the car parks, it is central to 3 areas, but, like, Bayfair had been there for so long, and then they kind of spent all the money making this beautiful lane, but then they haven't put the marketing or the time into changing the perception of what that mall delivers to the locals, and that's because their focus is, does Kmart have their sign? Does Woolworths get their thing? And we kind of get these they're all different, And I think for me, it's like, can I talk to them? Do I get good vibes at the beginning? And I'm never afraid to give them feedback. And I think for me, it's really important. Like, I will sit, as I said to you earlier this year, and sat down with Scott Pritchard, and I will tell him what this is what everyone's saying. This is what we can deal with if you want us to thrive, And I think one of the loveliest things that he said to me at the beginning of the year is, Mimi, you're going to be okay. We need burger. It's, like we're in this together. And I think that's what you want out of a landlord. And I think what you want out of an agent is also that connection between, and you said I spoke here 6 years ago. I spoke here because Georgie Catworthy asked me to come, and I turned up with my baby in a bassinet and she held on to her when I came here, and Georgie, for me, helped me negotiate my very first lease. I had no idea what I was doing, really. I mean, I did, but I didn't really. And, I was dealing with some pretty well-established landlords that had, a very clear commercial objective, and I sort of said to her, like, I need you to help me, and she did. And she went in there and she fought for me, and she knew that it was going to be a win-win for both of us, and she treated me like a human. And obviously I was learning at that point, and I've learned a lot more, but I'm still learning. And I think that support that she gave me and that honesty will always be in my heart and a huge part of my journey as a business owner in hospitality. And so I think all of those, we're all human. Like we're all we're all running businesses and we all need to make this like wheel work. And I think that I am definitely very focused on relationships. And I think it's important to keep those comms open and transparent, from budgets and capabilities through to we're having a hard time, could you get us some help? We don't, Like, I think it's just about, for me, I think it's keeping it as human as possible.
Yeah, I think it's also, from a landlord perspective, sometimes, and there's some great landlords in New Zealand that totally view this, that I don't think you can simply look at, GFA rent and just try and get the maximum output. I think you need a balance, right? The lawyer on the 39th floor probably is going to return you different to what a burger could, but what do they bring to your overall picture? I think it was Lucian Law from Saver Hospitality said on the back of COVID, something to the effect that other than work, hospitality is the number one reason that communities come together, and during that COVID period we really lost that. And I think I certainly felt it. I felt so isolated. And actually being able to get, I was so excited to get back into a restaurant. It wasn't because the food was necessarily any better or anything. It was actually just, coming together and feeling like a community again.
Just lastly to finish, and we've come up for time. Garrett, you see a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas, passionate foodies come across your desk. How do you validate what's going to be new and is interesting and potentially successful with your experience? And what are some of the more interesting food concepts that are right here, right now?
Right, so how do I evaluate it? I've got a massive form that people go through to understand what their values are, why they're doing this, who they inspire, who their target market is, who their competitors are, and to bring it all together into a clear box about who they are. And I think that makes a massive difference to whether you're going to succeed or not, if you're very, very, very clear on who you are and who it's for. And so you can make things work if you're very, very good at a particular thing. And I see a lot of the success around people who are focused on singular products. There is a reason for all the different types of hospitality, and to both Matt and Mimi's point, I think hospitality is incredibly important. I think it's, where we go on our first dates, where we, celebrate our grandmother's birthday, where we, go catch up with our mates, or go hang out on our own to feel a little bit better after a shitty day. And yeah, so a great cafe will always work, but it's a hard industry being a cafe. A great restaurant, the scale of what Mimi's doing with Mama is just such a welcoming, amazing space to be in. But people that are focused on an excellent product with a very focused concept, like what we've been seeing across here, Something Dumpling, the Wise Boys Burgers, Peaches Hot Chicken, Broke Boy Taco, these guys are really, really good at singular offerings, and then they create environments around them that support that and create a unique experience. So.
Nice, and I guess that is our challenge in this room and property. Really, is to create those environments where these businesses can be successful, and it is certainly a team effort. Look, that brings to the end our panel discussion today. I'd like to thank each of you very much. It's a privilege to have you all here. Thank you.
Thank you.